Welcome back, everyone. I'm glad that you're here. And what I want to do is just do a little bit of review of what we talked about in the last video, and then to just do a few more items that will help make you a better programmer. So let me start off with what we had here. And we talked about making sure that you put your name, the activity name on, and a little bit of description about what the program is going to do. In this particular case, it's going to get the length and width to calculate the area. I'm not using namespace standard up here. I've decided to do it this way. Again, that is kind of something that has been going ongoing debate. But if you only need a few items, it's best to just do it this way. There's no sense adding a ton of things on there that you really do not need. But if you want to use namespace standard, that's fine. So again, we create our main. We declared variables. Now, I like to declare them all on separate lines like this and not on the same line. And the reason being is you can then initialize them. And yes, I know initialization is not necessarily required, but in most cases, it's going to get initialized anyway. So you're not saving any computer time by initializing it, but you also could say the possibility of using a variable that just doesn't have any data in it. For instance, say you're calculating a total of integers being added. So you're going to go in there and you're going to do get integer, total, plus equals number. Well, that's great, but what happens if total never got initialized to 0 or got initialized to something different? So you always have to have that in the back of your mind. So a little bit of equals 0 is certainly not going to hurt anything, but it could definitely help you. So much for that. So comments, inline comments are really probably the hardest thing that everybody has to accomplish. My goal is to try to teach you the difference, but my thoughts are, and it works when I'm coding, when in doubt, put the comment in. You can always delete it later, or a person can ignore it. Some of the comments here, if you take a look at it, what is the length of the rectangle? What are you going to put in? Get length of rectangle. So it's kind of a little bit, doesn't make a lot of sense, but you know, again, you have to use your own judgment on things and not just say, oh, I don't need comments in here. Getting a comment that says getting inputs, really, that's kind of, you know, it's not meaningless. So if you see something that says no meaningful comments, look to see if you have comments of that in here, or outputting data, declaring variables, things of that nature. You want to have something that actually says, what are we actually doing here? So in this particular case, you would just put a comment here for the area, and just put area is the length times the width. Now, not all formulas are going to be this simple, but this gives you the idea. Instead of having one long formula in there, it makes it more challenging if a person is reading your code and not really fully understanding everything. And then we have C out the area tuning. Now, believe I talked about don't do C out the area the rectangle is, and then do length times width. And there's a lot of reasons for not doing that. Number one, it does make your code a little bit more difficult to read. But if you have an issue, it makes it a little bit more difficult to debug. But also, what happens if you need area again? That means you're going to need to calculate the length times the width more than one time. So you always want to try to do that at the same time. So what I want to do here is just talk a little bit about main. The main purpose of main is kind of like to be like an order giver, you know, a manager, director, just like saying, okay, program, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, have a nice day. So we have several things that we need to do here. We need to get the length of a rectangle, we need to get the width of a rectangle, and we need to calculate the area. So there are several different things that we can do to accomplish it. So let's start off with if we did it in main. So the first thing we need to do is, well, what happens if the person puts in a length of -1 or a length of 0. So you need to take that into consideration. So you would have to put this in a do while loop, or if you like to do while, I'm really more preference to do while loops. So we could do something like this. Do while, and then we can put length is less than or equal to 0. Let's put the equal where it goes. And yeah, that's okay. But then we don't have an error message. It's just going to go back and on in here. And then we can put the prompt here. So that's one way of doing it. And then we could do the same code for do while. And in this particular case, we're going to do length is less than or equal to 0. Then we have the same code. So now we have a whole bunch of things in main. It's making it a little bit more difficult to read. So let's take a look at a function. A function is basically designed to do something. If you've ever gotten something that you need to put together, it's broken down into certain steps. Do step 1, 2, 3, and so on. And if you make a mistake in step 1, you can go back and fix step 1. But if we have code in main that does 100 different things and you get the wrong results, where do you go to look for it? So that's why we learned about functions, which are really very useful. So this is the way I like functions to be done. I am a big function prototype person, and then we put the function definitions on top. Now, I know that it will work either way, but it's really better to do it this way. And the reasoning being is it makes your code cleaner, and not to have everything on top. You have main, and then you can run your main, and then you can look and see if there's any kind of issue. So let's declare a function that's going to get the length, and then we're going to change it, because why should we have to call the same function and write the same code to really do two different things? So let's go and write, we're going to return an integer, and we're going to call it get length. We do not need to return anything to it. Rather, we do not need to pass anything to it. So now what we need to do is write the actual definition. So a good thing to do is right away when you get the function definition, put in comments what the actual function is. We talked about having a whole bunch of extra brackets, and then all of a sudden one gets deleted and your program doesn't work. Now, here's what I do. Here's a little trick. I comment out the return, because if you forget to do the 0 and put in what it's supposed to be, then it's always going to return 0. So I figure if I forget to do this when I try to compile the program, look what's going to happen. It's going to give me an error about a return value. And somewhere it's there that says must return a value. So that way, if I forget, I'm good to go. So let's go and let's just copy this code here. And so we need an integer here. So we'll just call this integer. And we can call it length. We can call it number. We can call it whatever we want. And then you would put the comment here that you would need. I'm not going to do it to keep this video short. So then basically, we're just going to do cout. What is the length? Like what we had before. And then we'll do cin length. And then we will return length. So this does nothing to error check. So let's put a little bit of error checking in. Let's go right over here and create a variable called Boolean. And I'll call it valid input. And I'm setting it to true. So this is going to be used to do our error checking. So we need to put this inside a do while statement. Now I know there's a way to put this stuff inside the brackets, but I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way and cut and paste. But notice that when I do, everything will get indented. So now we have a do while loop that's going to check for us to make sure that we put in valid input. So I'm going to put while not valid input. Now notice I did not put in while valid input is false. This is the preferred way of doing things, which is why I'm trying to make these videos to show you that yes, your code works, but you want to make sure that you're doing it properly. So here we have it, and we're checking it in here. Now, sometimes you could put while need input, so that whatever your way of doing it is fine. They both do the same thing. So the next thing we do is if not valid input, then you can do cout, and you can put in your error message must be greater than 0. And then you can put please re-enter or whatever you want. So now if I try to run this program, it's never going to call this function here because I need to call it in main. So the first thing I'm going to do here is comment all of this out. And I found a way to comment everything within a selection. Hopefully it'll work while I'm on live video. It worked every time I did it. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to hit Control K. Then I'm going to hit Control C. And that worked. So that's good. That saves you having to type them manually. So right now we don't need this. So I'm going to do length equals get length. And what I always do is when I'm writing a function, before the return and after the return, I print it out, and that'll let me know right off the bat if my input is incorrect or my return is incorrect. So I'm just going to do cout length is, and we'll do length. And then I'm going to go, and here's a shortcut. If you click here and hit F12, it should take you to the function. And we did here. So now what I want to do here is before I do it, I'm going to return and then hit before that the cout. And I'm just not putting the length is there. All right. So let's go and run this program, and let's just see if this works. So it says, what is length? I'm going to put in, let's just test it and put in -5. So you always want to start off with negative values that are going to crash or whatever the limits are, and to make sure that your function traps it. So otherwise, if it doesn't, then you know right off the bat you have to go and fix it. So it says, okay, -5, length is -5, the area of the rectangle is 0. So you can see we have an issue here right off the bat. It says the length is -5. It didn't give us that error message. So we can go now right away, we can go back and fix that in here. So if not valid input in here, length is in here. If not valid, must be in 0. Cout length. So we know that we have an issue. So here's the issue. Now I kind of did this on purpose. The issue is we've never set the value of valid input. So here's how you do that. You take valid input equals, and I always put calculations in parentheses. So let's just do length is greater than 0. So now we'll go back and check that. Now notice how the very first thing I did was check for invalid value, and it didn't work. So now we can go back and fix this. Imagine if you had a whole bunch of functions that all did the same thing and didn't work, and then you had to go and find out which one didn't work. So let's go and run this again, and let's try it again with -5, and then let's go and type in our -5 again, and it says not valid, must be in there. So we're good, and we'll do 15, and it says the length is 15, the area is 15. So notice that the obviously the area is going to be 15 because we haven't gotten the width yet. So one of the things you notice is I initialized the length to 0. If I did not, and we never got the length, it could return whatever happens to be in here. I'm not saying it won't return 0, but it could return a number such as like -8 billion, things like that in here. So this is why you definitely want to initialize everything. So let's go and back to our main. And now we have the length, but now we have to do the same thing. So does it make sense to write another function that does the exact same thing? So why don't we do this? Why don't we create a function that gets an integer that's greater than 0? And then the next thing we're going to do in our next video is we're going to take that same function and we're going to do what's called overloading it so that we can pass something that's different than 0. Maybe we want to have a range that starts at 50 and we want to be able to put in something other than that. So you'll see. So let's go and change this here to, we'll call it get integer. So what I'm going to do here is I have get integer, so I can go and change all these things, or I can just find and replace. Shortcut is Control H. So I want to replace get length with get integer. So I like to do them one at a time. Doing replace all could cause an issue. So that takes care of that. That takes care of this. And this takes care of that. And we're done. So let's go and run this program again. It says valid input here, and up here it says get integer. So this time, let's go and get the same thing, but we're going to have another issue. And I'll show you how to fix that. So width equals get integer. And we'll do width to see out width. And let's go to our get integer function and get rid of that length in there. So here's the issue. This is saying what is the length. And if we're getting the width, it's going to say what is the width. So you could do the prompt before you do it, before you call get integer, but then you're having an issue where now you're having more and more stuff in main. So I will show you how to do that very shortly. So let's go and make this number. And we'll change this to number. And we'll change this to number. And we'll change this to number. Looks like we missed one. So now how are we going to fix this? Well, it's really very simple. We're going to add a parameter to the function get integer. And again, this is just one way of doing things. You could do the prompt here if you want. So let's change this and let's add a string to it. And now we have an issue. String is not being recognized. Why is it not being recognized? So the reason why it's not being recognized is because we have to tell the system where it's from, and that should take care of that. Now, this has nothing to do with the string class. You can use simple strings in here. You just can't use string length. You can't use insert. You can't use append. You can't use find, and all those other things. So what we want to do here now is create a variable, and we can call it prompt, but we don't even have to do it in this particular one. We only have to do it if we want to be fancy. That will be in a future video. So we don't really need this right now. So let's make this go by. And we'll go and do cout get width. So get integer. So now we have a string in here. So let's go down to the get integer, and I'll use this one here. And I'm going to put in string, and I'm going to call it prompt. So now instead of cout what is the integer, I'm just going to do cout prompt. And so far, everything looks good here. So what we're going to do here in the call to it, we're going to put in for the length, what is the length of the rectangle, or whatever you want to put. And then you're going to put a question mark, and somehow I got single quotes, so we need to fix those. So let's just test this one here and see if this works, and then we'll get. Now, we should get an error. So let me show you what's going to happen. Notice that little red squiggly line in here. So let's run it and get the compile error, and then you can see any kind of issue that we have and how to fix it. Oh, yep, there's our error, and it should say that too few arguments or get integer not found, one of the two in here. So you can see get integer is looking for a string. So here we'll do the same thing here, only we'll just change it to width. And now let's go and run this here. And we are hitting our 22-minute mark. So what I will do is make this the last part of it. And then what we'll do is pick up on our next video. So let's go and run this and see how this works. And there's still build errors. Awesome. So let's see what we have. Identifier num in line 53. So let's go fix that. So this should be number. And let's go and run it one more time. And what is the length of the rectangle? So let's do 25, and the width will be 10. So notice 25 and 25. Width will be 10. And so the area is 250. So everything is working right now. So this will be it for this video. On our next video, I'm going to talk about what we should do inside of a function, how we should comment it, and the things that we should and should not do, better ways to do a validation loop. Please refer to the email I sent out about the good and bad of using while true. So you always want to make sure that you have functions that have loops that are not going to run indefinitely in here. So that is it for this video. I hope that it helps. Please make sure to like it if you like it. Leave a comment, please. That really helps me. And see you at the next time around. Have a wonderful day.